checks the phone messages, he didn't know until 8 months later. Now, he eventually found out that Abby's ex-husband knew about the key. And in turn, when he found out and he met the husband, he learned everything he needed to know, and he finally got his closure on the key.
Yeah.
And he was able to figure out more about his father that he needed to know. Now.
TMI.
Yes. Now we move on to symbols.
Symbols!
Hold on. What did that say?
Wait. Symbols.
Symbols!
Yes, Mother?
Never mind.
Okay.
Whoa.
Alright, first symbol we have is the doorknob. Now the doorknob is very...
Don't do that.
it's related very much to the grandfather. When the bombing of Dresden first happened, nobody really paid attention because all the people who lived in Dresden were so used to the sirens going off every night that they just kind of brushed it off. But this time, it was different. This time, the bombings actually came and the planes flew over and half the entire town was destroyed. His whole family, along with the grandmother's entire family, had died. But the reason the doorknob becomes a symbol is because the only thing that left standing of his home was his door. And in his attempt to try to get in to save his family, he melted his hand on the doorknob.
Ow.
He became very obsessed with doorknobs once this happened. When living in his apartment with his wife, he took pictures of every single doorknob in the house and kept it. The doorknob became an obsession to him, which kind of relates to Oscar's obsession of the key. So those two symbols are hand in hand. Hence why one key also unlocks a doorknob, which shows how they're in connection even though they didn't really know each other. Now the key, no pun intended, is kind of like the key to his happiness. Without the key, Oscar had no more hope.
That was a good one.
Thank you. Oscar had no more hope. He left the key on a ring, and it was around his neck. And the key landed right specifically on his heart. And the key would stay there. Get out of here. And the key would be on his heart, and it represents his father along with his hope. Now, the more he got off task and got away from viewing what happened with his father and getting closure, the more that key became more of a dread to him. Like, he couldn't take it off. He would never take it off. And the moment he finally took it off is the moment he learned more about his father and he received the closure that his father needed to give him. And he finally gave the key to Mr. Black, the man who was searching for it.
Racist.
Mr. Black.
Now, all the characters are connected due to the one theme of grief. It's a very sad book, but it jumps around a lot, so you don't actually see the sadness. Now, you would think it was about the 9/11 story, but in reality it's about everyone else's tragedy. Every single Black that he meets has their own tragedy, and he learns of their tragedy and they learn of his tragedy. Now, Oscar's own tragedy is kind of a secret. Nobody knows about it. He heard his father's 4 messages that he left on the phone before he died when he got home from school that day, but he never let his mother know. He took the phone away and he bought a new one so his mother would never know that there were messages. But there was one 5th and final message that he never told anybody about. And until the moment where he was finally able to take off that key was the moment he was finally able to talk about it. He told the story of that his father actually called him when he was there and he was talking on the answering machine asking, "Are you there?" He asked about 11 times and this kid could not bring himself to answer the phone. So he blames himself for the death of his father, and he kept asking for forgiveness for not answering the phone. And it wasn't until then that he finally had his form of closure that he was looking for. Another important theme in this we have right here is themes, along with grief, is heavy boots. Ooh. Heavy boots is kind of like a motif as well, but it's mainly more as a theme. And knowing that everybody else has grief, Oscar kind of calls it his idea of heavy boots. Like, my boots are getting heavier because he's wearing the death of his father with him. He's carrying the death of his father all the time because he cannot give himself to move on. He wants to be sad. He wants to be angry. He doesn't want to be happy. And he's angry at his mother for trying to be happy and trying to move on.
Excuse me.
So, the more he walks around, the heavier his boots gets because this is an 8-month process. And the more he learns that others around him also have heavy boots. But in reality, he does help those other people because he's talking about his problems and they can talk about theirs. And one final theme we have is the impossibility of completely understanding. In the beginning of the book, his father and Oscar they would have little quests and games with each other where his father would hide something and give him little clues and he'd have to find it. Kind of like an Easter egg hunt, but not
Ooh.
really.
That sounds fun.
It was more high tech.
Oh.
It was more high tech.
Was it like a Twitter
So it's like a
message?
nerd herd Easter egg
It's,
hunt.
yes, nerd herd
Was that Twitter
Easter egg
message?
hunt. No,
Good
no,
deal.
no.
MySpace direct message?
We're on this, Brian. Okay, continue.
So what happens is his
Say
father
MySpace.
dies while he's in the middle of his final game with his father. He dies halfway through and he doesn't get to know the end of it. So right then he feels left alone. And Oscar, to begin with, has trouble understanding. When you read through his point of view, you can kind of see, as it's never really pointed out, but you can kind of infer that he has some form of autism. He's extremely intelligent, but he lacks the social skills that are needed. As a 9-year-old, he lacks an extreme amount of social skills. So he has trouble understanding
Same.
the simple things, but the major things he can't understand. Now, he even states in the book, and he quotes, he would have been able to explain everything. He's talking about his father because the things that Oscar didn't understand, his father did. So his father was his ability to completely understand. So without his father, he doesn't fully understand anything anymore. Now, this is for Miss Slifer.
Boom, boom.
There is an allusion here to Hamlet.
Call out.
Oscar does the play Hamlet because everybody in his class had to have a role, and he was a skull.
Ooh.
That was his role. But the reason Hamlet is so important is because Hamlet lost his father, and his mother moved on so easily, and Hamlet couldn't understand why his mother did that, and he was very angry at his mother, which is exactly how Oscar is feeling like, don't drink.
No, to be or not to be.
Don't drink that.
We'll
Can't
go
do that.
ahead.
And Oscar is mad at his mother for being friends with somebody else and being happy and laughing while he just sits there and cries. And he's mad that his father is gone and there's nothing he could have done. So there you go, Miss Slifer. Hamlet comes into everything.
Woo, woo.
And
Go
finally,
Hamlet.
we have
Boom!
style.
Just train, don't stop.
Style and diction here.
You say just trained and stuff?
Now, style in this one, it kind of changes from each perspective. First, we have the overall tone, which is very sad, somber, and sorrowful, because everybody's just sad. There's a lot of people dying in this book, and they talk about wars all the time. It's just,
Do they need some
bring
hugs?
it here. Yes, everybody needs a
You
hug.
need a bro hug?
Yep, yes. Now, when Oscar talks, the style of writing is much different from when the grandfather or the grandmother talks. Oscar uses vivid imagery all the time because that is how his brain works, and it has a lot to do with the fact that he's slightly autistic. They don't state the form of autism he has, but due to his autistic nature and mind, is he describes things very well. Not to mention, there's a lot of pictures in this book. It's kind of like a little kid's book.
Ooh.
There's lots of pictures. Lots of random pictures, like birds and an elephant's eye, but there's a lot of pictures.
So a doorknob.
Big fan of
There is a
children's
doorknob.
Is it a
See
nice doorknob?
the symbol connected. It's a very nice doorknob.
Would you want it in your household?
No, not really.
I'm listening inquisitive coat hanger.
So, but when you get to the grandfather's style and the grandmother's style, you can see the older person's point of view. It's a much easier read than the jumping around because Oscar goes, any thought that comes in his mind is on the paper, basically. It comes from his one thought of learning about how his kid made fun of him, and he asked if Emma Watson was here, what would you do? And he didn't understand why. And he didn't understand why the kids would make fun of him.
From Harry Potter?
So,
Big fan.
yes. So they would jump back and forth in his thoughts.
Granger.
But the grandmother and the grandfather was very straightforward because they were telling each other their life stories. And the grandfather was writing letters to Thomas Shekel, which is the father, because the grandfather actually left the grandmother when he found out she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
So then the day he came back was the day that his son died, and that's when they met. But Oscar does not know that his grandfather because the grandmother forbid him to let him know. So, finally, why is this important? The big question.
I don't
The
know.
whole-
I'm a coat hanger. What is that?
The Hoffman question, so what? Why is this important? The reason this is important is because tragedy can happen to anyone at any time. Now, initially, I was like, oh, this book is totally going to be about 9/11. Wrong.
Bob?
Wrong. Yes.
Bob.
Wrong. It talked about World War I with a 103-year-old man. He went through World War I.
Woodrow Wilson?
Talked about World War II, and it talked about 9/11.
Franklin Delano and George
And it
H. W.
showed that
Not just George W.
and it showed that the tragedy of one can connect to another. So one person's tragedy, Oscar's tragedy connected to all the other residents who were named Black, their tragedies as well,
Wow.
and he got to share them. So tragedy can happen to anyone at any time, and it's basically showing that you need to let people know all the time how much they mean to you. Because a lot of
YOLO.
characters in the book wrote to each other letters all the time saying, oh, this is why I love you and all that, and this is how
YOLO.
much you mean to me. Yes. You only live once. Yes.
You're a
You
good cook,
need to let people know. So it's important because nobody knows when tragedy can happen, and it's just a good connection. Is if you're having your own troubles, then you can see how people relate to theirs, because nobody ever knows what's going to happen, because nobody knows the future.
Feel bad for your son.
Yes. So there could be another tragedy in the future that could connect to somebody else, and even talking to somebody about it can make it better.
Even though they're-
Yay.
Yes. So, any last words?
You're on